Collier and Julian Falloon presenting for Sport Canterbury. Welcome.
Kia ora. Good afternoon, everyone. Do I have to push a button, or is it all go?
It's all go.
We'll take our submission as read, and conscious I've only got 10 minutes to advocate for 2 or 3 key things, so I'll get straight into it. I guess the first thing I want to make, and the point I want to make, is 3 years ago I sat in front of you and advocated strongly for the opportunity that was presented with Ngā Pūnawai. At that stage I advocated that this was the #1 sport and recreation rebuild project for the city. Bearing in mind I got a lot of flack through the submission at the time from sports and user groups of the Metro, because that was in their mind the #1, but I naturally assumed that was going to be a fait accompli. 3 years on, as of the middle of this year, we're going to have an athletics track, 2 hockey turfs, community fields for rugby league, and in time tennis courts. And I often reflect on what's really got me out of bed over the last 3 years is the thought of the athletes and volunteers travelling as far as Timaru to access athletics tracks, young kids playing on hockey turfs at late at night. No longer will they have to do that, and we're going to have a home for rugby league. And in time, the courts that we lost at Wilding Park will be replaced at Ngā Pūnawai. So I think it's a celebration acknowledgement of you as council for committing to that project, and in 3 years on we're going to have a fantastic new facility for our city. In addition, I think there's also acknowledgement from you as a council around the Metro sports facility and the outcome recently we received, to be delivered on its designated site, to be delivered within the current proposed scope, and being supportive of making some cuts around the form elements as opposed to the functionality of sports. So as a sector of representing the collective of sport in the city, I want to acknowledge the council for the commitment, and I know how tenuous it's been on both projects at different times over the last 12 months, to acknowledge you as a council but also your staff, and that starts with Mary Richardson, John Fassell, David Bailey and Steve Gibbling for your perseverance and commitment. So I want to start off with acknowledging and congratulating council for that. The second acknowledgement I want to acknowledge is this council's commitment to the Greater Christchurch Sports Facilities Plan, and we applauded the Selwyn District Council's submission around the consideration to a regional rates levy to help contributing to some of these facilities in a regional picture. Kevin fronted the Waimakariri District Council last week and advocated for that council to consider along those same lines. So again, acknowledge this council for the commitment to building a more strategic approach to future development of facilities. So again, congratulations. One thing that I want to touch on, and it's been in the media over the last week or so, is that our organisation submitted around flat water to the regeneration plan. We advocated strongly for the consideration of a 2.2 kilometre outer river option as part of the regeneration plan. We as a sector, and I think I speak on behalf of a number of user groups for flat water in the city, that were incredibly disappointed by that decision. And as I guess a 50% shareholder of Regenerate, urge you to put that decision under scrutiny, and possibly if we can get it over the line, a revisiting of that. We had some conversations with Regenerate on behalf of the sports last week, and they felt that, Regenerate made the comment that financially it wasn't a consideration, technically it could be done, and overwhelming the submissions through the regeneration plan supported the consideration to a flat water facility. So I'd like some endorsement, or from our perspective, to have a relook at that. Finally, in terms of the stadium, completely as a result of the review around the Metro and the stadium, we're completely supportive of a standalone site and on the designated site that has been chosen. We fully support the need for a covered stadium, and if funding permits a retractable pitch, to allow for a whole multi-use concept to maximise that from a functionality perspective. We fully support a capacity of around the 30,000 spectator mark, and as identified within the Greater Christchurch Sports Facilities Plan, that if we can bring it forward, we completely support that in terms of urgency for a stadium for our city and our region. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Question for Kevin.
Yes.
How did you get on at WOMAC?
So I considered my position bold yet sensitive, should I say? And I said, like, I understand that the subject is a prickly one, which the Mayor nodded and laughed and said, yes, it is. And I put the position, just said, look, we'd like you to at least enter that conversation and have the conversation. And there was general acknowledgement that it is a topic that they need to address. So there was no obvious commitment at the time, obviously, but it was received.
Thank you for doing that. That's much appreciated. Yanni.
Just two quick questions. One is under point 6 of your submission. You talk about a conversation around funding mechanisms regionally for regional and national sports facility developments, but you don't make reference to events. You've also endorsed spending more for Christchurch and Z. Are you taking the message to those other, or do you think it's fair that we ask those other regional councils to contribute towards the events, not just the developments? And just quickly, the second question was around, you've made comment around concern of the existing sand-based carpet fields, and I just wondered if you could elaborate to that point as well on page 5 of your submission.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so thanks, Yanni, if I can call you that. Thanks, Councillor. In terms of the regional rate for events, look, to be honest, we hadn't extended that thought process that far, but maybe it's a first things first discussion and see what options might exist and where it might land for the hard infrastructure, so facility conversation around a targeted rate or whatever it might be. But there's no reason why it couldn't be extended to the event side of things, because for the same reasons that the benefits are gained for a region, that you have a major facility such as the Metro or the stadium, the same with events, they bring benefit to the wider region, so there's no reason why the principles couldn't be extended, but our approach would be first things first, really.
Yeah, I think the context around the conversation was around the spaces and places facilities plan, so it was always going to be around the Metro, it was always going to be around the stadium. I think the other thing that we've started conversing with the Selwyn District Council around hockey turfs as an example, with the provision of 2 full hockey turfs at Ngāpunawai, they haven't been able to, or they haven't needed to at Foster Park, they put in a half hockey turf. So those sort of conversations across boundaries, they haven't had to invest because just down the road is a two brand new hockey turfs. So that converse argument and advocacy has been around the context of spaces and places as opposed to events at this stage.
And then on the other side of your question, the sports fields. So look, we're relaying a bit of information we've got from some of the sports fields users that the council invested significant capital in upgrading some of the fields for primarily at the time the catalyst was the FIFA Under-20 World Cup, Garrett Park and Avenue Park are a couple that comes to mind. The understanding is that that the maintenance on those possibly could do with a review or a look at, or perhaps some further investment in the maintenance, because the experts tell us that the sand carpets are only as good as well the way you maintain them, and perhaps they aren't carrying as much capacity as they could if the maintenance was kept up to date. That's what that's about. On a wider conversation too, another point we made in our submission is the staff, Christchurch City Council staff, led a process around a sports parks plan, network plan, and we applaud that. We're part of that conversation and we'd like to keep pushing that through. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your submission, much appreciated, and thanks for acknowledging the staff that have been supportive and helpful. Thank you.